Are you about to get a solar system and wondering if you should go with microinverters or power optimizers? Is one better than the other? And what about their cost? Like, could one significantly produce more power? Well, wait no more. We are performing another test, and the battle today is between these two. Let's see which one will generate more power. A lot of people tend to focus their decision on the solar panels, but this part is not going to affect your return on investment as much as the inverters themselves. You can have 100 panels, but if your inverter, whether it is micro or string, does not work, those panels are useless. And I often like to call the inverter the heart of the system. You really need it to work. So what is the difference between the two? And I will try to be brief here, but if you already know this part, feel free to skip the timelines included below and you can go straight to the actual testing. So the inverter's job is to convert DC, that is generated by the panels, to then AC, that is that usable power in your home. That's it, super easy. Well, there's two schools of doing it. You can either have a central inverter that sits in your garage like this one, the SolarEdge or SMA, and then panels paired with power optimizers or some sort of rapid shutdown device. Or the second way is to have a small microinverter placed underneath each panel and then of course connected to a central combiner box with an Envoy, aka the communication device, and it also could sit in your garage or on the outside of your house as well. I want you to know that I'm giving both of these products a fair trial. I will test them in same conditions, same shading situation, and we will simply review the outcome at the end. Oh, and before I forget, we are comparing IQ8 Ace, not IQ8 Plus. I definitely want to test these two against one another in the future video, but if we are playing fair, which we are, we really should not be pairing an IQ8 Plus with a 400 watt panel in the southern state facing south. Now, this definitely depends on the inclination, azimuth, and latitude of the system, but if I tested the pluses for this test, the battle would be lost by Enphase due to clipping. And like I said, we will test that in the future video, so make sure to stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, leave some comments down below, and finally, leave a big like. A lot of people below the first test said that they really want to see diffuse shading. They want to see a test with no power optimizer, shade figs, different string inverters. So we're going to do and try to do all of it. I promise you, I'm super excited. I mean, that video went out and next day we're like, okay, we're about to start another test. But what I want to test before we get to all of those is the biggest battle in the world is microinverter versus a string inverter paired with power optimizers, and see what the results are going to be. A lot of people suggest microinverters produce more, and that might be true. We're going to see how big that difference is and whether there is a big difference or not at all. So what you can see right here is that portable ground mount that we built here, and it takes us about 21 minutes to set this up every morning, and it gives us a really good flexibility to use different equipment. So we can test different microinverters, AP system, Hoymals, we can use string inverters, and we can see what's happening underneath it and just get a lot of data from it. All right, guys, we're gonna start with test number one. It's 10 a.m. in the morning, and you can see the sky. It's slightly cloudy, so it's not that clear, direct sunlight. So I'm really curious to see what the results are gonna be. On the left side, you're gonna see your microinverter side, and then on the right side, you see our 8 power optimizers with the panels by Tigo. Let's take a look at the results. And first, we're going to check out Enphase monitoring. You can see the panel level right here, and all the panels are generating in the same rate, and this is no surprise to that. You can also see in the left corner that the power output is at 675 watts, and this is AC, guys, right? So this is already transferred from DC, direct current, to alternating current. And now let's take a look at Tigo. And on the Tigo side, you can see that the panels are actually outputting more, but again, this is our DC side. And you can see that the power output in DC right now is 1,150 watts. Now, to be fair, we obviously have to take a look at the actual AC. So we're gonna look at the string inverter readings. And on SMA, you can see that at 10 a.m., the AC output was at 1,044 watts. So a little bit higher. Now comparing the two next to each other, again, 675 watts AC on the Enphase side and 1044 watts AC on the string inverter side. Going into test number 2, and you can see that it's still slightly cloudy out there. It's 10:30 in the morning. So let's take a look at the results from the Enphase side. We can see that it's outputting 1250 watts AC. Then comparing it to Tigo at 1479 watts DC, and obviously the string inverter a little less after the conversion at 1392. So let's take a look at both at the same time. So you can see the difference between Enphase and SMA right now is 142 watts more on the string inverter size paired with power optimizers. So as of the morning and no direct shade applied to the panels, the string inverter is doing a little bit better. All right, guys, we're going into test number 3. It is 10:45 a.m. and you can see that it's still slightly cloudy. Let's take a look at the results. So on the AC side on Enphase, we're at 1561 watts. This is AC. And on Tigo side, we're at 1631 watts DC. And obviously, we're going to look at Sunny Portal, and it's at 1618 watts AC. So let's take a look at the comparison both at the same time. So you can clearly see that Enphase is climbing up the higher the sun is and the less clouds we got, and it's pretty close together. The difference is 57 watts on the SMA side. Test number 4. All right, so on this side, we shaded half, or we applied a leaf onto the bottom part of the first panel. This is the microinverter side, IQ8 Ace. And then on the other side, we have Tigo Power Optimizers, and I applied the same size leaf to the bottom part of the first panel, and then we're gonna go see the results. So looking at Enphase website, we can see that with that leaf shading, we can see an output of 1684 watts AC, and you can see that decrease in production on that first panel right there. And same thing with Tigo, and this is again repeated from previous tests we've done, so we expected this. Now, clearly this is DC, so let's go into AC side of things, and SMA showing 1755 watts AC. So let's compare the two, and right now we can see that the difference between Enphase and SMA is 71 watts again for the string inverter side, even though, like, if you look at the actual output of the panel on the AC side, we have 137 watts, and that's already AC, and then on the C1 panel it's 138 watts DC. So obviously that after the conversion is gonna decrease even more. But let's keep going. Let's look at test number 5. Okay, another test. We're gonna apply a leaf to the top part portion of the panel. We're gonna go a little bit to the bottom part of the panel as well to make sure this fits properly. This is gonna be a repetition of the test we've actually done with the power optimizers and string inverters. And as you probably, if you haven't seen it, make sure to watch that video. But if you've seen that video, without power optimizers, that panel was just bypassed. The bypass diode worked, and it was just outputting 0 watts. And in this situation with power optimizers, it actually output a little bit, but it was very minimal value. So we'll see how different a microinverter reacts in that situation. Okay, we gotta speed this up a little bit. You don't have to watch me put those leaves on. We have quite a lot of tests ahead of us, so let's keep going. Okay, yes, and just a little side note, I am really trying to be very precise as far as where I'm putting that leaf so that we have identical shadow placed or a blockage of sun in that particular area of the panel. And the results of test 5 are, okay, so Enphase, you can see that significant decrease in power output. We are right now at 1838 watts AC, and then looking at Tigo, 37 watts for that particular shaded panel, and 2095 watts DC, and looking at SMA and AC, 1765. So comparing all two options together, you can see that Enphase is actually now starting to perform better than string inverter with power optimizers. So 1838 watts AC on Enphase and 1765 watts on the AC side for Sunny Portal. This is less than 100 watt difference, but that is still a small difference. And if we look at those two shaded panels individually, you can see that the decrease of those panels is actually very significant, and they do work very similarly, which is kind of a confirmation from what happened in my previous test as well. Make sure to watch that video if you haven't already. Okay guys, test number 6, and we're gonna apply more shading to the existing leaves right now. And what I'm gonna do is apply a cardboard to half panel 4 and half panel 8 on both the microinverter and the optimizer side. Basically identical testing that I've done with the power optimizers versus no optimizer video, so we can see how different the results are going to be with the microinverters. We are also going to confirm the results from the previous test when we use the power optimizer. So let's keep going. Okay, so looking at Enphase, we can see the power output is at 1,799. Tigo DC 1896, and then of course Sunny Portal at 1725. So let's compare the two together. So as you can clearly see, the panel that's shaded in half in both instances is basically cut in half. So going from 295 watt per panel unshaded to 149 to 150 watts after shading that half the panel. And you can see the total difference between Enphase and SMA is about 74 watts in favor to Enphase. Test number 7, and what we're gonna do right now is add 1/3 of a panel coverage. I am just really curious to see if there is gonna be a difference between covering half a panel or covering 1/3 of a panel. So let's take a look at the results. And on the Enphase side, we can see 1759 watts. We're going to analyze all the panels individually in just a second. On the Tigo side, we can see 1760, and AC on the string side, 1668 watts AC. So let's take a look at all of them together at once. And this is pretty interesting. Look at that. So looking at Enphase, or focusing your eyes on that side, the blue panels, you can see that panel number 4 is at 158, and that's the panel that's covered in half. And then panel number 7 is covered by 1/3 of a panel is covered by cardboard, and it's 165 watts. So it's almost the same, even though we're covering 1/3 of a panel versus half a panel. And then you can see the same thing on the green panel. So looking at the Tigo side, the top right corner, you can see panel C4 at 160 watts, half a panel covered, and then C6 at 162 watts. Jeez, this is so interesting. So like I said, cover it 1/3 and you get the same drop in power production as covering the panel in half. And just looking at the system production as a whole, you can see that Enphase is slightly leading here against when we apply this sort of extreme shading. Test number 8. What we're trying to do is just create more and more and more shadow to the point where we're gonna have almost all of them and then all of them shaded in some way, shape, or form, whether it's cardboard or leaves, and we're gonna see what the results are. Okay, so it's 1:30 p.m. right now, and we can see on the Enphase output at 1683 watts AC. And then let's take a look at power optimizers by Tigo. This is DC at 1739 watts. And of course, looking at the string inverter AC output at 1590. And let's take a look at all of them together. So now we can actually compare the difference between those different shadows applied. So you can see last panel is covered by the cardboard, looking at Enphase side at 165 watts. And then the next panel over to the left, it only has that small leaf, but it's also dropped down below 200 watts output. Now, same thing, mirroring thing happens on the Tigo side. So you can see that they're reacting to that shadow in a very, very similar way. And again, the power output here for the Enphase is at 1683 watts and 1590 for the Sunny Boy. So Enphase is still leading when it comes to that extreme shading. Test number 9. And again, what we're gonna do right now is just keep applying more shadow to more panels. And this is what I'm doing right now. And okay, I totally forgot I did that, but let's just keep going with the results. So what you can see is the power output of the Enphase side is 1560. And then if we look at Tigo optimizers, we can see 1512 watt DC, right? Not AC. And then looking at the AC side of the power optimizers, we're at 1397. So let's compare both of them together on the same screen. So you can see that all the panels that have the shadow applied are decreased in a very similar way. There's only 2 panels without any shadow applied, but those panels are still over 300 watts. And then if you compare that to Tigo, you can see pretty much a very mirroring situation. But if we compare the power output of the actual system right now, we can see that Enphase lead is increasing a little bit more. Test number 10, and what I'm doing right now is we actually created that filtered or diffused shade that you've been asking for. So we created this little chimney so that we can see what that will have as far as the effect on the panels. So looking at the results on the Enphase side, we can see 1464 watts AC. And then on the Tigo side, we can see 1396 watts DC. Obviously, we're going to look at Sunny Portal, and this one is at 1330 watts AC, and then looking and comparing both of them together on the same screen. So what we can see right here is that diffuse shadow did drop the production from about 328 watts AC to 248 watts AC, and then very similar thing happened to the optimizer side, except panel C3 is actually affected by that too and dropped down alongside C2 panel. This is actually very surprising, but it is what it is. Hey, that's what I'm here for, to test this and see what the reality of the production is. So again, you can see that Enphase is leading slightly as far as shading goes. Test number 11. Okay, you've asked for diffused shade, so that's what we're doing. We're placing a bigger chimney, bigger than this one for sure, that's casting shadow onto the second from the last panel on both arrays. Looking at Enphase, and we're going to focus on the panel output when we compare both at the same time, but you can already see the big difference that bigger chimney made. But the total power output on the AC side is 2214 watts. And then looking at Tigo optimizers and the DC side, we are at 2247 watts DC, and on the string inverter side at 2086 watts. All right, so comparing both at the same time, you can clearly see how big of a difference that chimney made. And you can see that the total difference between the two arrays is 128 watt difference. So Enphase is again leading when it comes to shading. And it's not a huge difference, but we're gonna review the results from the whole day testing also. Test number 12. The time has come for the test of the small leaves. So I'm gonna apply it to the top corner of the first panel, the bottom corner of the last, and then in the middle of the middle panel. We're gonna do panel number 4 this time. And I don't know if you remember, if you haven't seen that video, but whenever we did this with power optimizers, we've experienced about 20 to 30% a decrease in power production. So we're gonna see how this is gonna affect the microinverters. I don't want to prolong this video any longer, so let's speed this up a little bit. And looking at Enphase, we can see that the results are 2062 watts AC on the Enphase side. On Tigo Power Optimizers, DC 1998 watts. And finally, on the string inverter side, we can see 1941 watts AC. So let's compare how much difference we experienced due to that little shadow. And oh boy, there is a huge difference. I mean, we're still experiencing about, 20, 30, 35% decrease in production just because of that tiny little leaf. So the results again confirm based on the previous test we've done with just power optimizers. And you can again see that the decrease that the system or the panel can experience based on that small leaf at 4 p.m. And comparing the total production of the day for those two systems, so looking at Enlighten, the day one, we got 11.73 kilowatt hours from the whole system, and on day two, we got 12.42 kilowatt hours. So let's look at Sunny Portal and SMA data. Day one, we got 11.23 kilowatt hours, and day two, we got 12 kilowatt hours. So just comparing the two to one another, you can see that the difference is very minimal. We're talking about 3.5% more on the Enphase side of the system. Now, I understand, and you mentioned that too in the comments, that those are very extreme shading conditions. So I guess the way you can think of this is, what is my worst case scenario gonna be if I choose Enphase or if I choose a string inverter with power optimizers? To be fair, to the whole generation results, we also have to compare the costs. What are we really getting for our money? So let's review the cost between the two different options that we have, and we will use pricing that I found online on Enphase website and online distribution stores. We're gonna base this off a 10 kilowatt system consisting of 25 400 watt panels, and we're only focusing on the cost of the inverter side. So we're not including mounting, installation panels, etc. So on this side, you can see the total cost of microinverters and the combiner box. And then on this side, you can see the total cost for the string inverters and power optimizers by Tigo. The price difference is $2,642, which means that the power optimizer system comes out at 40% lower cost. Now, in conclusion, I really can't tell you which one will suit your needs better. In case of a limited roof space and significant shading, your better option might be Enphase, but on the other side, if you don't have any spacing issues or shading issues, you might want to invest in a bigger system with simply more panels. Both options are gonna be great. What do you guys think? Is it worth it? Is it not? Please let me know down in the comments. What would you do for your own home? Thanks again so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe and give this video a big like, and stay tuned for more and different microinverter testing.